Where do cultural ideas come from? What ensures that some take root while others fade away? What creates the variations in the universal themes demonstrated by all human beings? The evidence accumulated by cultural anthropologists, cultural psychologists, and social scientists suggests the answers lie in a multitude of disciplines, including geography, psychology, linguistics, and biology. In this brief presentation, we will explore theories and models that examine how culture is created, stored, and transmitted. We will begin with three theories of culture creation: as a response to environment or the ecology, as an evolutionary process, and evoked in epidemiological culture. There is historical precedence that human beings have always adapted to their environment, but whether they subjugated it, battled it, or lived in harmony with it determined the adaptive strategies that developed among the members of that region, among the people of that region. Nisbet offers two examples: China and Greece. The fertile plains of China built a culture of cooperation and harmony in its people because rice farming required them to work in concert. If they did so, a successful harvest was ensured and the food needs of its people were satisfied. It also meant that the needs of the individual had to be subsumed to those of the larger collective, which eventually became the culture of that region and is today termed as collectivism, or China is called a collective culture. Greece, on the other hand, is largely mountainous terrain, and this led to traditions of hunting, trading, and fishing, which were conducted in isolation for the most part. Think of a man and his sons going out to hunt or fish and thereby provide for their family. So, any of these activities happened in very, very small units, leading to what we today term an individualistic culture. In other words, the needs of the individual come before those of the community. Thus, these adaptive strategies became the foundations of the cultures of these regions, coalescing over time to become the normative behavior for that particular group. In the case of culture as an evolutionary process, evolutionary psychologists such as Lida Cosmides, John Tooby, David Pinker, and David Buss advocated that if the Darwinian process of natural selection can create universal physiological adaptations, then it is also logical to assume that it has created universal psychological adaptations as well, and that these, over time, have become universal human nature. Boyd and Richardson also state that culture can be studied as a Darwinian evolutionary process because it is a part of human biology. Organic evolution over time has shaped people's brains and minds to the point where acculturation and enculturation are deeply entrenched in the human biology and psyche. In essence, this group of researchers are saying that all human beings have the capacity to acquire, store, process, and share information. Evoked in epidemiological culture, this theory was posited by Tooby and Cosmides in 1992 as an extension of the evolutionary approach that they first posited in 1992. They were essentially building from the theory of universal psychological adaptations and saying that differences in local environments would evoke different responses from the people that lived in these regions. In doing so, it created a new body of cultural content, which they termed evoked culture. They also used the term epidemiological culture to explain the phenomenon of socially transmitted information. In essence, much as a disease travels from person to person in an epidemic, so does an idea that originates in the mind of an individual travel from person to person until it is adopted by all and becomes a part of the group culture. It is evident at this point, then, that humans have garnered both psychological and biological capacities to learn from each other and align their behavior to the cultural group of which they are a part. However, this kind of information exchange can only happen through some kind of transmission channels. And while there are a myriad transmission channels that can be examined, we are going to focus on three specific theories or modalities. The first, postulated by Boyd, Richardson, Enrich, Tomasello, among others, suggests that social learning is a form of learning that eventually manifests as culture and encompasses mimicry, instruction, and other kinds of social transmission. In essence, members of a group imitate each other or teach each other, or quite simply in their daily interactions share knowledge which eventually becomes the normative behavior of that particular group. Hendrick and Boyd, for their part, termed the phrase conformist transmission to explain human tendency to adopt the most common behavior of the group. Within a particular population, conformist transmission ensures that popular traits will be adapted with increasing frequency till it becomes the normative behavior. Thus, conformist transmission provides both the direction and the force that establishes and maintains cultural norms. Prestige biased transmission is yet another transmission channel which was conceptualized by Hendrich and Gilwhite. It is a form of social learning that suggests that the most skilled or knowledgeable individuals in a group are imitated by the rest, who then accord these individuals prestige markers. As these behaviors are preferred by the community, as they adopt them in greater frequency, they eventually become a part of the group's normative behavior, and over a period of time and by a larger extension, the group's culture. The third theory we'll examine is called the neo-diffusionist transmission model. Diffusionism is basically the process by which cultural components spread across people, societies, and geographic regions. It first emerged in Europe in the early 19th and 20th centuries, essentially as a response to colonialism. However, this early version did not account for how cultural information was transmitted across the population, what were the mechanics of this process, and there was no empirical evidence that substantiated its claims either. Contemporary researchers are aware of this flaw and are trying to assess and examine the possible repercussions of the diffusion process. And in this approach, since it differs from the original notion of diffusionism, it has been termed neo-diffusionism. While there are many models and theories that have studied culture using this approach, we will focus on Kashima's model, which proposes that cultural information transmission is a deliberate act or socially coordinated activity. It occurs for a specific amount of time. It is defined by the collaborative goals of the participants, and the activity ends when the goals have been met. It is situated within a specific context, and it leverages communication tools. According to Kashima, cultural identity accrues from these kinds of deliberate, contextual, and collaborative social interaction, and they eventually lead to a cohesive pattern on information that becomes representative of that group's identity, mindset, and norms. It is also understood that these kinds of joint activities not only operate on an existing base of mutually understood knowledge, but in the course of these exchanges, in the course of these collaborative activities, in these and interactions, it adds to that existing corpus of beliefs and norms, and thereby expands and extends them as well. In essence, therefore, one could argue that culture is learned group behavior. It is also a response to the environment, and that it accrues from a common body of knowledge that is shared by a definable population. However, for culture to manifest, it needs language and communication. In fact, language and communication is critical in the transference of information, and even the casual interpersonal interactions that happen on a regular basis could result in the creation of a cohesive and common corpus of ideas and beliefs. And although there are many, many types of transmission avenues by which social information exchange could happen, the primary three we discussed here were one of social learning, one where the most popular individuals' behavioral norms were adapted by other members of the group, and also one of conformity, where the desired behavioral attributes were picked up with increasing frequency until they became the norm of that particular group or in geographical community. This concludes this brief presentation on creating, storing, and transmitting culture.